The frozen air bit at my face as I pulled the starter cord on my vintage Polaris Snowmachine, and the engine roared to life with that beautiful two-stroke scream that every winter enthusiast knows and loves. I had no idea that starting my machine on this crisp January morning in Eagle River, Alaska would lead to one of the most absurd confrontations of my life. But then again, I had never dealt with someone quite like Patricia Henderson before. I live in a fairly upscale neighborhood called Timber Ridge Estates, where homes range from modest three-bedroom places to sprawling 5,000-square-foot lodges. When I moved here 5 years ago, I specifically chose this location because of its proximity to the Snowmachine trails that crisscross through the surrounding wilderness. What most people in the neighborhood didn't know, and what Patricia Henderson certainly didn't know, was that I owned every single acre of those trails. All 47 miles of them. My name is Wright, and I made my fortune in software development before I turned 35. I sold my company to a major tech firm and retired to Alaska to pursue my real passion: winter sports and land conservation. The trail system I purchased was formerly owned by a logging company that had gone bankrupt. When it went up for auction, I jumped on it, seeing an opportunity to preserve the land while maintaining it for recreational use. I kept the ownership quiet because I didn't want the hassle of people constantly approaching me about access rights or trying to buy portions of it. The HOA at Timber Ridge Estates was relatively hands-off when I first moved in. They focused on keeping the common areas maintained and ensuring people didn't paint their houses neon colors or leave junker cars in their driveways. Then, about 18 months ago, Patricia Henderson moved in 3 houses down from mine and immediately got herself elected as HOA president. That's when things started going downhill fast. Patricia was exactly what you'd picture when you hear the term HOA Karen. Mid-50s, with that distinctive "let me speak to your manager" haircut that defied all laws of nature and aerodynamics. She drove a white Lexus SUV with custom plates that read Leader 1, and she wore those oversized sunglasses even in the dead of winter. Within 2 months of taking over as HOA president, she had issued more violation notices than the previous board had issued in 5 years. That morning, I was dressed in my insulated snowmobile suit, preparing for what should have been a peaceful ride through the backcountry. My machine was properly registered, I had all my safety gear, and I was on my own property. The trail access point was technically on HOA common land, just a small 10-foot strip that led from the neighborhood to my trails. But there had never been any issue with residents using it to access the recreational areas beyond. I was adjusting my helmet when I heard the shrill voice cutting through the morning air. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I turned to see Patricia marching across her perfectly manicured lawn, still in her bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, her phone clutched in one hand. Her face was twisted in that particular expression of righteous indignation that I'd seen her wear at HOA meetings. "Going for a ride," I called back, keeping my tone neutral. I had learned that engaging with Patricia only made things worse. On a weekday morning. "Do you have any idea what time it is? Some of us are trying to enjoy our peaceful morning coffee without being subjected to that racket." I glanced at my watch. It was 8:30 in the morning. Hardly an unreasonable hour, and definitely not a violation of any noise ordinance in the municipality. "It's 8:30, Patricia. Well within acceptable hours." "That's Mrs. Henderson to you," she snapped, moving closer. "And I don't care what time you think it is. That machine is a nuisance, and I've had multiple complaints from neighbors about your constant coming and going at all hours." This was news to me. I maybe took my snow machine out twice a week, usually in the late morning or early afternoon. I wasn't out joyriding at midnight or dawn. But Patricia had a habit of exaggerating or outright fabricating complaints to support whatever crusade she was on at the moment. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not violating any laws or HOA rules, I said, preparing to mount my machine. Oh, we'll see about that, Patricia said, her voice taking on that dangerous tone that meant she was about to do something dramatic. She raised her phone to her ear, and my stomach sank as I realized what was happening. Yes, hello. I need to report a noise disturbance and possible trespassing. There's a man on an illegal recreational vehicle causing a public nuisance. I couldn't believe it. She was actually calling 911 over a snow machine in Alaska, where probably half the population owned one. Patricia, are you seriously calling emergency services? That's not what 911 is for. She held up one finger to shush me, which made my blood pressure spike. Yes, I'm the president of the Timber Ridge Estates HOA, and we have rules about this sort of thing. He's operating a loud, dangerous vehicle in a residential area. I decided to let this play out. I shut off my machine and pulled out my own phone, leaning against my snow machine, while Patricia continued her dramatic recounting of my alleged crimes to whatever poor dispatcher had taken her call. I texted my attorney, James Morrison, giving him a heads-up about the situation. Within 15 minutes, an Alaska State Trooper SUV pulled up to my house. Officer Rodriguez stepped out, looking less than thrilled to be there. I recognized him from town. We'd chatted a few times at the local diner. "Morning, Lucas," he said with a tired smile before turning to Patricia. "Madam, you called about a disturbance?" "Yes, officer." Patricia practically ran over to him, her slippers kicking up snow. "This man has been running that horrible machine at all hours, disturbing the peace of our quiet neighborhood. We have HOA regulations about this sort of thing, and I demand that you issue him a citation." Officer Rodriguez looked at my snow machine, then at me, then back at Patricia. "Madam, is the machine currently running?" "Well, no, but it was. It was so loud I could barely hear myself think." "And what time was this?" "Just before I called, maybe 20 minutes ago." "So around 8:15 in the morning?" "Yes." Officer Rodriguez pulled out his notepad, more out of protocol than necessity, I suspected. "Madam, there's no noise ordinance violation for operating a registered recreational vehicle at 8 in the morning, and this is Alaska. Snow machines are a normal part of life here." Patricia's face was turning an impressive shade of red. "But the HOA rules clearly state that residents cannot operate noisy equipment without approval from the board." "HOA rules don't supersede state law, madam," Officer Rodriguez said patiently. "And even if they did, I can't enforce civil HOA regulations. That would be a civil matter between you and Mr. Wright here." "Civil matter? He's trespassing. He's going to take that machine onto the protected wilderness trails behind our neighborhood." This was interesting. I waited to see where she was going with this. Officer Rodriguez turned to me. "Lucas, you planning to ride on any restricted land?" "Nope," I said honestly. "Just the recreational trails that are open to the public." "There, see, madam, no law is being broken here." Patricia was practically vibrating with frustration. "Those trails are not for public use. They're protected wilderness. I've done my research, and recreational vehicles are absolutely forbidden on that land." I couldn't help it. I started laughing. I genuinely couldn't hold it back. Patricia looked like she wanted to spontaneously combust. "What exactly do you find so funny?" she demanded. "Patricia, Mrs. Henderson, whoever you want to be called," I said, still chuckling. "Those trails aren't protected wilderness. They're privately owned land that's maintained for recreational use." That's absolutely false. I checked with the county records, and there's no private owner listed. That land is held in trust for conservation purposes. It's held in a land trust, yes, I agreed. The Wright family land trust, to be specific, which I established when I purchased the property 4 years ago. The look on Patricia's face was absolutely priceless. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Officer Rodriguez was trying very hard not to smile. Is this true, Lucas? You own the trail system. Every acre. 47 miles of trails, about 3,000 acres total. I bought it at auction from the defunct Northland Timber Company. Cost me about $2 million, but it was worth it to preserve it. Patricia had found her voice again. That's impossible. You're lying. I would have known about this. Why would you have known? It's not exactly public information. The land trust is registered with the state, but unless you specifically searched for the ownership documents under the trust name, you wouldn't find it. And even then, my name isn't directly on the paperwork. That's kind of the point of a trust. Officer Rodriguez was definitely grinning now. Well, madam, it sounds like Mr. Wright here is free to use his own property however he sees fit, as long as he's following state regulations for recreational vehicle use. But the noise, the disruption, this is a residential neighborhood. At 8:30 in the morning, you don't have a legal leg to stand on, Officer Rodriguez said firmly. Now, I need to get back to actual emergencies. Madam, in the future, please don't call 911 unless there's an actual emergency. Dispatch has more important things to do than mediate HOA disputes. As Officer Rodriguez drove away, Patricia turned her full fury on me. This isn't over. You may think you own that land, but the HOA has rights too. That access point you're using goes through HOA common property, and as president, I'm authorized to restrict access to it. Actually, Patricia, you should check your own HOA documents before you make threats like that, I said calmly. That access point is part of a permanent easement that was established when this neighborhood was first developed. The original developer included it specifically to give residents access to the recreational areas. You can't revoke it. We'll see about that. She stormed back toward her house, slippers soaked with snow. I knew this wasn't going to end well, but I had no idea just how far Patricia was willing to take things. Later that afternoon, I got an email from the HOA. It was a formal notice informing me that an emergency board meeting had been called for that evening to address serious concerns regarding resident behavior and property use. The meeting was mandatory for all board members, and residents were strongly encouraged to attend. I forwarded the email to James, my attorney, along with a summary of the morning's events. He called me back within the hour. Lucas, this woman sounds unhinged, James said, but legally, she can't do anything about you using your own property. I know that, you know that, but does Patricia know that? Probably not, if she's as stubborn as you're describing. My advice, go to the meeting, stay calm, and let her dig her own hole. If she tries anything illegal like actually blocking the easement, we'll have grounds for a lawsuit. I attended the meeting that evening. The HOA community center was packed, which was unusual. Normally, these meetings attracted maybe a dozen people, mostly retirees with nothing better to do. Tonight, there must have been 40 people crammed into the small room. Patricia stood at the front, looking like she'd spent the entire afternoon preparing for battle. She'd changed into a power suit and had printed out what looked like a hefty stack of documents. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, she began, her voice sugary sweet. We have an urgent matter to address that affects the safety and property values of our entire community. I sat in the back, arms crossed, waiting. As many of you may know, We have a resident who has been operating dangerous recreational vehicles at inappropriate hours, disturbing the peace and potentially creating liability issues for our HOA. A few heads turned to look at me. Most people in the room knew who she was talking about. This morning, this individual was operating a snow machine on HOA property without authorization. When I attempted to address the situation, he became hostile and refused to comply with HOA regulations. This was a fascinating revision of history. I raised my hand. Patricia's eye twitched. Yes, Mr. Wright? Just to clarify for everyone here, I was operating my registered snow machine at 8:30 in the morning on the public easement that provides access to the recreational trails behind our neighborhood. I was not hostile, and I was complying with all applicable laws. You were creating a noise disturbance at 8:30 in the morning, which is well within legal hours. Officer Rodriguez confirmed this when you called 911. A murmur went through the crowd. Patricia's face flushed. The specific time is irrelevant. The point is that these vehicles are dangerous and inappropriate for a residential setting. I'm proposing that the board vote tonight to ban all recreational vehicles from using the HOA easement. You can't do that, I said calmly. It's a permanent easement specifically designated for access to recreational areas. The HOA has the authority to regulate use of common property for the safety and benefit of all residents, Patricia countered. Another board member, Frank Zimmerman, raised his hand. Frank was a retired contractor who'd lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone. Patricia, Lucas is right. That easement was part of the original development plan. We can't just ban people from using it. That would probably violate the CC and Articus. Then we'll amend the CC and Articus. Patricia said, her voice rising. I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of restricting recreational vehicle access through HOA common property. Patricia's hand shot up. One other board member, a woman named Susan who always voted however Patricia wanted, also raised her hand. The other 3 board members kept their hands down. The measure fails, Frank announced. 2 votes aren't enough to pass anything. Patricia looked like she wanted to explode. Fine. Then I'm proposing that we levy a usage fee for anyone who wants to use the easement for recreational vehicle access. $1,000 per year seems reasonable to cover wear and tear on the property. Patricia, that's clearly retaliatory and probably illegal, Frank said, exasperated. You can't just make up fees because you're mad at Lucas. I'm not retaliating against anyone. I'm protecting this community. The meeting devolved from there, with Patricia making increasingly outlandish proposals and the other board members shooting them down. Eventually, people started leaving out of boredom or frustration. By 9 o'clock, the meeting disbanded without any action being taken. I thought that would be the end of it. I was very wrong. 2 days later, I woke up planning another ride. The weather was perfect, with fresh powder from an overnight snowfall. I got dressed, had breakfast, and headed out to my garage around 9 in the morning. That's when I saw the chain. Someone had installed a heavy-duty chain across the easement access point, secured with a serious padlock. A laminated sign hung from it. No recreational vehicles beyond this point by order of Timber Ridge Estates HOA. I stood there for a moment, absolutely stunned by the audacity. Then I pulled out my phone and took several pictures from different angles. I called James immediately. She actually did it, I said when he answered. Patricia physically blocked the easement. Are you kidding me? James sounded more excited than concerned. Lucas, this is clear-cut interference with your property rights. We can absolutely sue for this. I don't want to sue my own HOA. I just want to use the trails. Well, you've got a few options. You could cut the chain since you have the legal right to access the easement. You could call the police and report it as an illegal obstruction. Or you could let me send a strongly worded letter that will scare the pants off their entire board. Let's start with option 2, I said. I want this documented. Officer Rodriguez showed up again, this time with a partner. He examined the chain and the sign, then shook his head. Man, she really doesn't give up, does she? Apparently not. Okay, so here's the deal. This is a civil matter technically, since it's about property rights and easement access. But it could also be considered criminal mischief or harassment depending on how we look at it. The easiest thing is for me to tell her to remove it immediately, and if she doesn't, then we can talk about citations. We walked over to Patricia's house. She answered the door in full makeup and another power suit, like she'd been expecting us. Officers, Mr. Wright, how can I help you? Mrs. Henderson, did you install a chain blocking the recreational easement? Officer Rodriguez asked. The HOA board authorized the installation of a security barrier to protect community property, yes. Madam, that's not exactly what happened according to Mr. Wright here. He says the board voted against restricting access. The board has the authority to take emergency action when necessary to protect community interests. Mrs. Henderson, that easement is legally designated for public access. You can't block it. I absolutely can when it poses a danger to residents. Officer Rodriguez's patience was clearly wearing thin. Madam, you need to remove that chain immediately, or I'm going to have to cite you for obstruction. You can't cite me for protecting my community. Actually, I can. You're interfering with a legal easement. That's against the law. Patricia crossed her arms. I refuse to remove it. This is HOA property and I'm the president. I have the authority. No, madam, you don't. And now I'm going to have to issue you a citation for criminal mischief. The color drained from Patricia's face. You're giving me a ticket. Yes, madam. And if that chain isn't removed within 24 hours, there will be additional charges. As Officer Rodriguez wrote out the citation, I could see the wheels turning in Patricia's head. This wasn't going the way she'd planned. She'd probably expected me to just give up and find another place to ride, or maybe she thought the other residents would support her crusade. Instead, she was the one getting in trouble. This is ridiculous, she muttered as she snatched the ticket from Officer Rodriguez's hand. I'm going to fight this. That's your right, madam. You'll have a court date in about 6 weeks. After the officers left, Patricia turned her fury on me. You're going to regret this. You think you can just waltz into this community and do whatever you want. I have connections. I know people. I will make your life here absolutely miserable. Patricia, all I want to do is ride my snow machine on my own property. You're the one making this complicated. Your property. You don't own anything. You're a liar and a troublemaker. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd saved of the property deed and land trust documents. This is the registration for the Wright Family Land Trust. This is the deed transfer from Northland Timber Company. This is the map showing the 47 miles of trails that I own. Would you like me to email these to you? She stared at the screen, her expression shifting from anger to confusion to something that might have been fear. You're serious? You actually own all of that land? Yes, Patricia, I do. And I've been very generous in allowing public access to it. But if you keep interfering with my rights, I'm going to have to reconsider that policy. That was probably the wrong thing to say because her expression immediately hardened again. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. The land is mine. I can close it to public access anytime I want. The only reason I haven't is because I believe in sharing these resources with the community. But if the community, represented by its HOA president, is going to make my life difficult, then maybe I need to rethink my generosity. I walked back to my house, leaving Patricia standing in her doorway. I felt a little guilty about threatening to close the trails, but I was also frustrated beyond belief. This was supposed to be my quiet retirement, my chance to enjoy the wilderness and share it with others. Instead, I was dealing with HOA drama that would have been ridiculous in a sitcom. The chain was gone by the next morning, but I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, I got another email from Patricia that afternoon. This one was a formal complaint filed with the HOA board, claiming that I had threatened to close public lands and demanding that the board take action against me. The email was CC'd to every resident in the neighborhood. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. Neighbors I'd never spoken to were calling to ask if it was true that I might close the trails. Some were polite and concerned. Others were angry and accusatory. By dinner time, I'd received probably 20 calls and twice as many emails. I decided to get ahead of this before Patricia's narrative took hold. I drafted an email and sent it to the entire HOA distribution list. "Dear Timber Ridge residents," I wrote, "there seems to be some confusion about the recreational trail system behind our neighborhood. I'd like to clarify a few facts. First, I am the owner of the trail system through the Wright Family Land Trust. I purchased this land 4 years ago to preserve it and maintain it for recreational use. Second, I have always allowed free public access to these trails and have no plans to change that policy. Third, the recent disputes between myself and HOA President Patricia Henderson are the result of her attempts to prevent me from accessing my own property. I have never threatened to close the trails except in the context of defending my legal rights against harassment. I am committed to keeping these trails open and accessible to everyone who wants to enjoy them responsibly. If anyone has questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me directly." I included my phone number and email address and hit send. Patricia's response came within minutes. Her email accused me of lying, misrepresenting the facts, and attempting to manipulate the community. She claimed that I was a danger to neighborhood property values and that she had a duty as HOA president to protect residents from my reckless behavior. But the tide was turning. Other residents started responding, asking Patricia for proof of her claims. Frank, the retired contractor on the HOA board, sent an email asking Patricia to provide documentation of any HOA rules I had actually violated. Several people pointed out that they'd been using the trails for years and had never had any problems. By the end of the week, a petition was circulating to remove Patricia as HOA president. I didn't start it and I didn't sign it, but I watched with a mixture of relief and guilt as it gained signatures. Patricia had made a lot of enemies during her 18 months in charge, and this situation had given people an excuse to act. But Patricia wasn't going down without a fight. The following Monday, I came home from running errands to find an official-looking envelope taped to my front door. It was a cease and desist letter from an attorney claiming to represent the HOA. The letter stated that I was in violation of multiple HOA covenants and demanded that I immediately stop operating recreational vehicles on or near HOA property, remove all recreational equipment from my property, and pay damages to the HOA in the amount of $50,000 for diminishment of property values and disruption of community peace. I called James immediately and read him the letter. "Who's the attorney?" he asked. I checked the letterhead. "Roger Pemberton, Pemberton and Associates," James laughed. "Oh, I know Roger. He's a real estate guy, does mostly closings and contract reviews. This is way outside his usual work." I'm guessing Patricia hired him personally and is claiming to represent the HOA. Can she do that? Not without board approval for this kind of thing. Let me make some calls. An hour later, James called back. Just as I thought. Patricia hired Pemberton on her own and told him she had board authority. I called Frank Zimmerman, and he confirmed that the board never authorized any legal action against you. In fact, they're meeting tomorrow night for an emergency session to discuss removing Patricia from her position. This is getting out of hand, I said. It's been out of hand since she called 911 on you for starting your Snowmachine. But it's almost over. The board is going to remove her, the cease and desist is worthless, and her citation for criminal mischief is still pending. She's pretty much dug her own grave here. But Patricia had one more card to play, and it was the most desperate move yet. 2 days later, I was working in my home office when I heard vehicles pulling up outside. I looked out the window to see a news van from one of the Anchorage TV stations. A reporter and a cameraman were setting up on the street, and Patricia was talking to them, gesturing dramatically toward my house. I grabbed my jacket and headed outside. And he's threatened multiple times to close the trails out of spite, Patricia was saying as I approached. He has no regard for this community or the families who live here. He's using his money to bully everyone around him. The reporter, a young woman with a professional smile, turned as I walked up. Mr. Wright, I'm Jennifer Chang from Channel 7 News. Mrs. Henderson here says you're planning to close public hiking trails that the community has used for years. Would you like to comment? Those aren't public trails, I said calmly. They're private property that I own and have generously kept open for public use. Patricia jumped in. See? He admits he's planning to close them. I said I've kept them open, not that I'm closing them. Mrs. Henderson has been harassing me for weeks because she doesn't like snow machines. She's called 911, illegally blocked access to my property, and hired an attorney to send me fraudulent legal threats. All because I started my snow machine at 8:30 in the morning. Jennifer's expression sharpened. This was getting more interesting than a simple land dispute. Mrs. Henderson, is it true you called 911 over a snowmobile? I called to report a noise disturbance and potential safety violation, Patricia said defensively. At 8:30 in the morning, in Alaska. Jennifer was clearly familiar enough with local culture to know how absurd that was. The time doesn't matter. The point is that he's a menace to this community. Actually, Mrs. Henderson received a citation for criminal mischief when she illegally blocked an easement, I added. And the HOA board is meeting tonight to remove her from her position as president because she's been acting without board authority. Patricia's face went pale. That meeting is supposed to be private. How do you know about it? Because Frank Zimmerman called to give me a heads up. He thought I might want to attend. Jennifer was taking notes rapidly. This sounds like quite a story. Mr. Wright, would you be willing to give us a tour of the trail system and show us the property documents? Absolutely, I said. And I'd be happy to provide documentation of everything Mrs. Henderson has done over the past few weeks. Patricia tried to interrupt, but Jennifer was already moving toward the news van. Mrs. Henderson, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll be doing a full investigation and we'll contact you if we need any additional comments. As the news van drove away, Patricia turned on me with pure venom in her eyes. You've ruined everything. You've made me look like a fool. Patricia, you did that all by yourself. I just wanted to ride my snow machine. The HOA board meeting that night was packed. Every single resident who could make it showed up, along with Jennifer and her cameraman from Channel 7. The board had moved the meeting to the local community recreation center to accommodate the crowd. Frank Zimmerman, as vice president, called the meeting to order. We're here tonight to address serious concerns about President Patricia Henderson's conduct over the past several weeks. Multiple complaints have been filed regarding her actions, including unauthorized legal representation, misuse of HOA funds, and harassment of a resident. Patricia stood up, her voice shrill. "This is a witch hunt. These people are out to get me because I tried to protect property values." "Patricia, sit down," Frank said firmly. "You'll have a chance to speak." Over the next hour, the board laid out a comprehensive case against Patricia. She had spent nearly $5,000 of HOA funds on the attorney without board approval. She had filed false reports with police and code enforcement. She had installed the chain blocking the easement using HOA funds, also without authorization. She had sent emails to residents containing false information about me and about HOA business. The list went on and on. When Patricia was finally given a chance to defend herself, she went on a rambling tirade about how she was the only one with the courage to stand up to me, how I was destroying the neighborhood with my reckless behavior, and how everyone would regret this when property values plummeted. The board vote was unanimous. Patricia was removed as president and from the board entirely. Frank Zimmerman was appointed interim president, and a special election was scheduled for the following month. As people filed out of the meeting, several neighbors approached me to apologize for Patricia's behavior and to thank me for maintaining the trails. It felt good to have the support, but I was exhausted from the whole ordeal. Jennifer caught me on the way out. "Mr. Wright, we're going to run this story tomorrow evening. I wanted to let you know that we did some additional digging, and we found that Mrs. Henderson has a history of this kind of behavior. She was removed from an HOA board in Colorado before she moved here for similar issues." "Seriously?" "Yeah, we're still tracking down details, but it looks like this is a pattern for her." The story ran the next evening and went viral locally. The headline was "HOA President Calls 911 Over Snowmobile, Gets Removed from Board." It was a perfect encapsulation of the absurdity of the whole situation. The comments on the news station's website were overwhelmingly supportive of me, with Alaskans up and down the state weighing in about HOA overreach and Karen behavior. But the story wasn't quite over yet. Patricia's court date for the criminal mischief citation came up 6 weeks later. I was subpoenaed to testify, which I wasn't thrilled about, but I showed up at the Anchorage courthouse on a cold February morning. Patricia had hired Roger Pemberton, the same attorney who'd sent me the fraudulent cease and desist, to represent her. He argued that Patricia had been acting in her capacity as HOA president and had genuinely believed she had the authority to install the chain. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Deanna Torres, wasn't having it. She presented the HOA board meeting minutes showing that the board had explicitly voted against restricting access. She showed Officer Rodriguez's body cam footage from the day he'd ordered Patricia to remove the chain. She showed the easement documents proving that Patricia had no legal authority to block it. When I was called to testify, I simply told the truth about everything that had happened. Patricia's attorney tried to make it seem like I was retaliating against her for legitimate HOA concerns, but it fell flat when I showed the judge photos of the property documents and explained that I'd owned the trails long before Patricia ever moved to the neighborhood. The judge found Patricia guilty of criminal mischief and ordered her to pay a fine of $500 plus court costs. Additionally, the judge ordered her to complete 20 hours of community service and to stay at least 100 yards away from my property unless she had legitimate business there, essentially a partial restraining order. Outside the courthouse, Patricia accosted me one last time. Roger Pemberton tried to hold her back, but she shook him off. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'm going to sue you for defamation, for harassment, for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I'll take everything you have." "Mrs. Henderson, you need to stop," Roger said nervously. "The judge just ordered you to stay away from him." "I'm not threatening him. I'm informing him of my legal rights." Deanna Torres, the prosecutor, was walking past and overheard this. She stopped and turned around. "Mrs. Henderson, I strongly suggest you follow your attorney's advice. If you continue to harass Mr. Wright, I can and will file additional charges. Do you understand?" Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and stormed off toward the parking lot. Roger gave me an apologetic look and hurried after her. Diana came over to me. "Mr. Wright, if she contacts you again, please let me know immediately. Her behavior is escalating and I'm concerned about what she might do next." "You think she's dangerous?" "I think she's obsessed and irrational, which can be just as dangerous. Be careful." I thanked her and headed home, hoping that this really was the end of it. For about 2 weeks, things were quiet. I went back to my normal routine, taking my snow machine out several times a week to maintain the trails and enjoy the backcountry. Other residents waved when they saw me leaving or returning. A few even stopped by to ask about the trails and to thank me for keeping them open. The HOA held its special election, and a woman named Rachel Stevens was elected as the new president. Rachel was a nurse at the local hospital, practical and no nonsense. Her first act as president was to formally apologize to me on behalf of the HOA for Patricia's behavior, and to assure me that the board fully supported my use of the easement. I thought Patricia had finally given up and moved on. Then I got a call from James. "Lucas, we have a problem. Patricia just filed a lawsuit against you." "For what?" "Everything. Defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with her duties as HOA president, even fraudulent misrepresentation about the land ownership." "But she's not HOA president anymore, and I have documentation proving I own the land." "I know. This is what we call a SLAP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to intimidate you and drain your resources, not to actually win, but we still have to respond to it." "How much is she suing for?" $2 million. I sat down heavily. "That's the exact amount I paid for the land." "I noticed that. She's trying to claim that your land purchase somehow damaged her, even though she didn't even live here when you bought it. The whole thing is absurd, but we have to take it seriously." Over the next few months, the lawsuit consumed a huge amount of my time and energy. Patricia's allegations were wild and varied. She claimed that I had misrepresented myself to the community, that I had damaged her reputation by telling people about her behavior, that I had caused her emotional distress by refusing to follow her directives, that I had interfered with her ability to perform her duties as HOA president. James filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the suit was frivolous and that Patricia's own behavior had led to her removal from the HOA board. We included documentation of everything: the 911 call, the illegal chain, the unauthorized legal expenses, the court conviction for criminal mischief. The hearing on the motion to dismiss was scheduled for late April. By then, the snow was starting to melt and the snow machine season was winding down. I was looking forward to switching to mountain biking on the same trails once the ground dried out. The morning of the hearing, I met James at the courthouse. Deanna Torres, the prosecutor from Patricia's criminal case, was there too, though not in an official capacity. She'd taken an interest in the case and wanted to see how it played out. Patricia showed up with Roger Pemberton and a woman I didn't recognize. James whispered that she was probably a litigation consultant or a second attorney. The judge hearing the motion was Michael Harrison, a veteran jurist known for not tolerating nonsense. He spent about 20 minutes reviewing the briefs, then looked up at Patricia and her legal team. "Counselor, I've read your complaint and I have to say, I'm struggling to find any valid legal claims here. Can you explain to me how Mr. Wright defamed your client?" Roger stood up. "Your Honor, Mr. Wright made multiple false statements about Mrs. Henderson to the media and to members of the community." "What false statements specifically?" "He claimed that she had harassed him, that she had acted without authority, and that she had violated HOA rules." "But those statements are all true, are they not?" Judge Harrison looked at his notes. "Mrs. Henderson was convicted of criminal mischief. She was removed from the HOA board for acting without authority. The HOA itself confirmed that she violated multiple policies. How is it defamation to state true facts?" Roger floundered for a moment. "Your Honor, the manner in which he stated these facts was designed to humiliate and harm Mrs. Henderson." "That's not defamation, Counselor. That's hurt feelings. What else do you have?" Roger went through the other claims, but Judge Harrison systematically tore each one apart. The intentional infliction of emotional distress claim failed because I had simply been defending my legal rights. The harassment claim failed because all of my interactions with Patricia had been in response to her actions. The interference claim was absurd because I had no duty to comply with Patricia's directives, especially when she was acting without authority. Finally, Judge Harrison turned to the fraudulent misrepresentation claim. "Counselor, your client alleges that Mr. Wright misrepresented his ownership of the land. But I have before me documented proof that Mr. Wright does, in fact, own the land through a properly registered land trust. Where's the misrepresentation, Your Honor, Mrs. Henderson was not aware of this ownership at the time of their disputes. Her lack of awareness doesn't constitute fraud on Mr. Wright's part. He had no obligation to inform her of his property ownership, especially when she was actively harassing him." Judge Harrison closed the file in front of him. "I'm granting the motion to dismiss with prejudice. This lawsuit is without merit and appears to be retaliatory in nature. Mr. Wright, you're entitled to recover your attorney's fees." "Counselor Pemberton, I suggest you be more careful about the cases you take on in the future." Patricia stood up, her face red. "This is outrageous. He's been harassing me for months. He's turned the entire neighborhood against me." "Mrs. Henderson, sit down," Judge Harrison said sternly. "You brought this lawsuit without any valid legal basis. You've wasted this court's time and Mr. Wright's resources. If you continue to pursue baseless litigation against him, I'll consider sanctions. You understand?" Patricia sat down abruptly, and I could see tears starting to stream down her face. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I just felt exhausted and relieved. As we left the courthouse, James was grinning. "That went about as well as it could have possibly gone. We'll file for attorney's fees, which should come to around $30,000. She'll have to pay that on top of what she's already paid Pemberton." "You think she'll actually pay?" "She doesn't have much choice. If she doesn't, we can put a lien on her house." Deanna came over to congratulate us. "Nice win." "For what it's worth, I've been keeping an eye on Mrs. Henderson. She's been posting some concerning things on social media about you. Nothing explicitly threatening, but it's obsessive. I'd suggest you keep your guard up." That warning turned out to be prescient. 2 weeks after the court hearing, I was out on the trails on my mountain bike. It was a beautiful May afternoon, and the trails had dried out nicely after the spring thaw. I was about 5 miles from the trailhead when I came around a bend and nearly crashed. Someone had strung a wire across the trail at about chest height. If I'd been going any faster, I would have been seriously hurt or killed. I stopped immediately and examined the wire. It was steel cable, the kind you'd use for heavy-duty applications, and it had been tied between two trees on either side of the trail. It wasn't old or naturally occurring. Someone had put it there deliberately. I took photos, then carefully removed the wire and brought it back with me. I called Officer Rodriguez immediately. "This is serious, Lucas," he said when I showed him the wire. "This isn't just harassment anymore. This is attempted assault, maybe even attempted murder depending on how the DA wants to look at it. You think it was Patricia? I don't want to jump to conclusions, but she's the obvious suspect. Let me talk to my supervisor." The Alaska State Troopers opened a full investigation. They searched the area where I'd found the wire and discovered footprints and tire tracks. They also found evidence that someone had been watching the trailhead, including cigarette butts and energy drink cans in a concealed position overlooking the parking area. Based on Diana Torres's information about Patricia's social media posts, they got a warrant to search her house and vehicle. In her garage, they found a spool of the same type of wire that had been strung across the trail. In her car, they found a notebook with pages of notes about my routines, including the times I usually went riding and which trails I preferred. Patricia was arrested 3 days later and charged with attempted assault and stalking. The bail hearing was brief. The judge, looking at the evidence and Patricia's history of harassment, set bail at $50,000 and ordered her to wear an electronic monitoring device if she made bail. Roger Pemberton had apparently dropped her as a client after the dismissed lawsuit, so Patricia had to use a public defender. She made bail by mortgaging her house, but the electronic monitoring meant she couldn't get within a mile of me or the trail system. The case went to trial in August. I testified about everything that had happened, from the first morning when Patricia had called 911 to finding the wire across the trail. The prosecution presented Patricia's notebook, her social media posts, and the physical evidence linking her to the wire. Patricia's defense was that she'd been driven to desperation by my harassment and by the community turning against her. Her attorney tried to paint her as a concerned citizen who'd been pushed too far. It didn't work. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding her guilty on both counts. At sentencing, Judge Harrison, who'd handled the dismissed lawsuit, was the presiding judge by coincidence. He didn't look happy to see Patricia in his courtroom again. "Mrs. Henderson, when you appeared before me in April, I warned you about continuing your campaign against Mr. Wright. You not only ignored that warning, you escalated your behavior to the point of endangering his life. That wire could have killed him." Patricia's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal history apart from the misdemeanor mischief charge. She's been under tremendous stress and wasn't thinking clearly." "Stress doesn't excuse attempted assault, Counselor." Mrs. Henderson demonstrated planning, premeditation, and a clear intent to harm Mr. Wright. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. Judge Harrison sentenced Patricia to 3 years in prison for the attempted assault and 1 year for stalking, to be served concurrently. She'd be eligible for parole after 18 months with good behavior. Additionally, upon release, she'd be on probation for 5 years with a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting me or coming within 500 yards of my property or the trail system. As the bailiffs led Patricia away, she turned and looked at me one last time. There was no anger in her expression anymore, just a kind of hollow exhaustion. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. After the sentencing, several reporters wanted to interview me, but I declined. I'd had enough publicity to last a lifetime. Jennifer from Channel 7 did a follow-up story about the case, focusing on how HOA disputes can spiral out of control. It became a cautionary tale that got picked up by national news outlets. The HOA at Timber Ridge Estates underwent some major reforms after everything that happened. Rachel, the new president, worked with the board to implement new policies requiring board approval for any legal action, establishing term limits for officers, and creating a proper complaint resolution process. They also formally acknowledged my ownership of the trail system and passed a resolution thanking me for maintaining public access to it. I ended up creating a formal management structure for the trails, establishing rules and guidelines for use, and even hiring a part-time caretaker to help with maintenance. I wanted to ensure that the trails would remain accessible and well-maintained for years to come. About a year after Patricia's sentencing, I was out on the trails on my Snowmachine, enjoying a perfect winter morning. The sun was bright, the snow was deep, and the air was that special kind of crisp that only happens in Alaska. I stopped at one of my favorite overlooks, a spot where you can see for miles across the valley. A couple of other riders pulled up, locals I'd seen around but didn't know well. We chatted for a few minutes about trail conditions and the weather. As they were leaving, one of them called back, "Thanks for keeping these trails open, man. We really appreciate it." That moment made everything worth it. The harassment, the lawsuits, the stress, all of it faded away. This was why I'd bought the land in the first place, to preserve this beautiful wilderness and share it with people who appreciated it. I never saw or heard from Patricia again after her sentencing. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that her house went into foreclosure while she was in prison, and that she moved to the lower 48 after her release. I hope she found some peace and got whatever help she needed. As for me, I'm still living in Timber Ridge Estates, still maintaining the trail system, and still enjoying my retirement. I've gotten more involved with the HOA, serving on committees and helping with community events. The neighborhood has become a genuine community rather than just a collection of houses. I still start my Snowmachine on winter mornings, and the sound of that two-stroke engine roaring to life still brings a smile to my face. But now, instead of anxiety about what Patricia might do, I feel nothing but excitement for the ride ahead. The irony of the whole situation never escapes me. Patricia wanted to stop me from using the trails because she thought I was just another resident abusing community resources. If she'd done even basic research, if she'd approached me with curiosity instead of hostility, if she'd been willing to listen instead of assuming she was right, none of this would have happened. I would have happily explained about the land trust, maybe even offered to work with the HOA to create better trail access for residents. Instead, her assumptions and her need to control everything around her led to criminal charges, jail time, and financial ruin. All because she called 911 when I started my Snowmachine. Sometimes I take groups of kids from the local schools out on the trails, teaching them about wilderness safety and environmental conservation. I've donated to local Snowmachine clubs and hiking organizations. I've worked with the state to connect my trail system to other public lands, creating an even larger network of recreational opportunities. The trail system has become something bigger than just my personal playground. It's become a community resource, a place where people can disconnect from the stress of daily life and reconnect with nature. Families use it. Athletes train on it. Tourists come from all over to experience it. And every time I ride out onto those trails, passing through that easement that Patricia tried so hard to block, I remember how close I came to just giving up and moving somewhere else. I'm glad I stood my ground, not just for myself, but for everyone who uses and enjoys those trails. The whole experience taught me something important about HOAs and about people in general. Most people are reasonable. Most people want to get along and find solutions that work for everyone. But there are some people, like Patricia, who see everything as a battle, who need to control their environment and everyone in it. When those people get a little bit of power, they can cause tremendous damage. It also taught me about the importance of standing up for your rights, even when it's exhausting and frustrating. If I'd given in to Patricia's demands that first morning, if I'd just agreed to stop using my snow machine or to avoid the trails, it would have emboldened her to keep pushing. She would have found something else to target, some other resident to harass. By holding firm and documenting everything, I not only protected my own rights but potentially protected future residents from similar treatment. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to, eventually. It took time and money and stress, but in the end, justice was served. Patricia faced consequences for her actions, and the community learned important lessons about governance and accountability. Now, several years later, life in Timber Ridge Estates is peaceful. The HOA functions smoothly under Rachel's leadership and her successors. Neighbors actually know and like each other. Community events are well attended and enjoyable, and the trails continue to provide recreation and enjoyment for hundreds of people. I still ride several times a week during the winter, and I've expanded to using the trails for mountain biking, hiking, and even cross-country skiing depending on the season. I've met some of my closest friends through the trails, and I've had some of my most memorable experiences out there in the wilderness. Every time I start my snow machine now, I think back to that morning when Patricia came storming across her lawn in her bathrobe and slippers. At the time, it seemed like such a terrible start to what should have been a simple, enjoyable ride. Looking back now, I can almost laugh at the absurdity of it all. Almost. Because while the story has a happy ending for me, it's hard to forget that someone's life was ruined in the process. Patricia made terrible choices, absolutely, and she deserved to face consequences. But I wonder sometimes if things could have been different if she'd gotten help earlier, if someone had intervened before her need for control spiraled into criminal behavior. That's the real tragedy of the whole situation. It didn't have to happen. None of it had to happen. If Patricia had just let me ride my snow machine in peace, we both could have avoided months of conflict and stress. She'd still be living in her house. She wouldn't have a criminal record and she wouldn't have spent time in prison. But we can't change the past. All we can do is learn from it and try to do better in the future. As for the trail system, it continues to thrive. I've set up a nonprofit foundation to manage it, ensuring that it will remain open and accessible even after I'm gone. The foundation has attracted support from businesses, outdoor recreation groups, and individual donors who share my vision of preserving wild spaces while making them accessible to people who want to enjoy them responsibly. The easement that was at the center of so much conflict remains open and well maintained. There's actually a small plaque there now, installed by the HOA, thanking the community members who fought to keep it accessible. My name isn't on the plaque, which is fine by me. This was never about recognition or glory. It was always just about being able to ride my snow machine on my own land without harassment. Sometimes, on quiet winter mornings when the sun is just coming up and the snow is sparkling like diamonds, I'll sit on my snow machine at that overlook and just take it all in. The mountains, the valleys, the endless white landscape stretching out before me. This is why I came to Alaska. This is what I wanted to preserve and share, and I did it. Despite the obstacles, despite Patricia's best efforts to stop me, I did it. The sound of my snow machine starting up still echoes through the neighborhood on cold winter mornings. But now, instead of complaints and 911 calls, I get waves from neighbors and kids asking if they can go riding with me sometime. The HOA meetings are boring again, which is exactly how they should be. Life is good. The trails are open, and my snow machine runs beautifully. In the end, that's really all I ever wanted.